On our anniversary, my husband's sister whispered something in his ear. I watched his hand clench into a fist before he grabbed my wrist and dragged me out of the party. Is it true? He demanded, his eyes burning with rage. I smiled slowly and leaned in. What do you think? His face drained of color. Is it true? He demanded, his eyes burning with rage. I smiled slowly and leaned in. What do you think? His face drained of color. 10 minutes earlier, everything had been perfect. Champagne flowed like water at our 10th anniversary celebration, the crystal chandeliers of the Caldwell Estate ballroom casting a honeyed glow over Boston's elite. I wore Sarah's favorite designer, a midnight blue gown that hugged curves she and I once shared identically. My husband James stood across the room, his tailored tuxedo accentuating broad shoulders as he laughed with the governor. For 3 years I'd been living as Sarah Caldwell, my dead twin sister, and nobody suspected a thing. Not even her husband. Before we continue this twisted tale of stolen identity and dangerous secrets, take a moment to subscribe. It's completely free and ensures you'll never miss another story of deception, revenge, and unexpected redemption. Ready to discover what happens next? Let's dive deeper. I lifted my champagne flute to my crimson lips, Sarah's signature shade, and scanned the room with practiced confidence. The string quartet played our wedding song as waiters circulated with silver trays of canapés. Senator Harrison winked as I passed, and I returned his gesture with the slight head tilt I'd perfected from studying Sarah's mannerisms in home videos. Every moment of my existence was a performance, exhausting but necessary. You've outdone yourself with this party, Sarah, James's college roommate remarked, kissing my cheek. I don't think I've seen half of Boston's financial district in one room since your wedding. James insisted, I replied with Sarah's light, breathy laugh. You know how he loves to remind everyone of his perfect life. And it was perfect from the outside. The successful investment banker with his beautiful socialite wife, their restored Beacon Hill brownstone featured in architectural magazines, charity board memberships, and weekend sailing trips to Martha's Vineyard. All a carefully maintained image that James protected religiously. Across the room I caught him watching me. Unlike most husbands celebrating a decade of marriage, there was no warmth in his gaze. Only assessment, like I was a prized thoroughbred whose value reflected directly on him. Before the accident, during the rare family gatherings where both Sarah and I were present, I'd observed how differently he treated her. His hands constantly at her waist, possessive and intimate. With me he maintained a strange emotional distance while simultaneously parading me at every social function. Darling, he called, summoning me to his side as the Prescotts approached. You remember Harold and Vivian? Of course, I replied, extending my hand exactly as Sarah would, slightly limp-wrist, expecting it to be kissed rather than shaken. Vivian, that necklace is divine. These interactions were second nature now. I'd studied my sister's social calendar, her correspondence, even her shopping habits. I knew which charities she supported superficially and which she actually cared about. I knew which friends she genuinely liked and which she merely tolerated for social positioning. I'd become a better Sarah than Sarah ever was. The evening proceeded flawlessly until the toasts began. James stood at the center of the ballroom, one arm loosely around my waist as he raised his glass. To my beautiful wife, he announced to the assembled guests. 10 years that have flown by. Sarah, you continue to surprise me every day. If only he knew how true that statement was. As applause rippled through the crowd, I noticed his sister Eliza moving purposefully toward us. Unlike the other guests in formal attire, she wore a simple black dress that seemed to announce her disapproval of such extravagance. She'd never liked Sarah, or me by extension, viewing her brother's marriage as beneath the Caldwell legacy. Tonight, something in her expression made my stomach tighten. She reached James, her fingers gripping his sleeve as she stretched up to whisper in his ear. Whatever she said took only seconds, but the effect was immediate. I watched James's face transform, confusion, disbelief, then something terrible I'd never seen before. His hand holding the champagne flute, clenched so tightly I thought the stem might snap. Then his eyes found mine across the crowd, something primal and dangerous in them. Before I could react, he crossed the room in 4 long strides. His fingers closed around my wrist with enough force to bruise, though his society smile remained fixed in place. "Excuse us," he said to the startled couple I'd been chatting with. My wife and I need a private moment. The cluster of guests nearby laughed knowingly. An anniversary celebration, a husband whisking away his wife. If only they knew. He pulled me through French doors onto the terrace, then down marble steps into the garden's maze, his grip never loosening. Summer roses perfumed the night air, their scent incongruously sweet against the violence of his movements. When we reached the center of the maze, where a small fountain bubbled, he finally released me, leaving angry red marks on my skin. "James, you're hurting me," I said, rubbing my wrist. "DNA doesn't lie," he spat, pacing like a caged animal. "Eliza had your glass tested." "Your DNA?" "Sarah's DNA from her hairbrush before the accident. They don't match." My heart thundered against my ribs. This moment, the one I'd prepared for and dreaded for 3 years, had finally arrived. Eliza had always been suspicious of subtle changes in Sarah after the accident, watching me with narrowed eyes at family gatherings. "Do you know what else she found?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "A familial match. Not identical but close enough to suggest a sibling." "Is it true?" I considered my options in those stretched seconds. Denial would buy time, but the evidence was damning. Confession might destroy everything I'd built. But there was a third option, one I'd meticulously prepared for. "Is it true?" he demanded again, his eyes burning with rage. I smiled slowly and leaned in. "What do you think?" His face drained of color. In that moment of his stunned silence, I felt a strange power shift between us. For 3 years I'd lived in fear of discovery, carefully maintaining a persona. Now that the truth teetered on exposure, I realized I held more cards than he knew. "You think you know everything now, James?" I continued, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. "You think Eliza's little DNA test tells the whole story? There are things about your perfect wife, your perfect marriage, your perfect family that would make tonight's revelation seem trivial." His confusion was palpable, exactly as I'd planned. When confronting a dangerous truth, introduce a more dangerous one. Behind my calculated smile, my mind raced through the contingency plan I'd developed for this very scenario. The hidden evidence, the offshore accounts in Sarah's name, the photographs locked in a safety deposit box across town. Everything I needed to ensure that if I went down, the entire Caldwell empire would come with me. "We should return to our guests," I said softly. "After all, it's our anniversary. We can discuss this later when you're prepared to hear the whole truth, not just Eliza's version." I turned toward the party's distant lights, the familiar weight of Sarah's diamond bracelet on my wrist catching the moonlight, while James stood frozen, his world crumbling around him. I let James stew in his confusion as we rejoined the party, plastering on the perfect smile Sarah had perfected. But beneath my composed exterior, memories of that rainy night 3 years ago flooded back. The night that changed everything. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the torrential downpour as Sarah drove us along the coastal highway. We rarely spent time together, but she'd insisted on this sister weekend in Cape Cod, claiming she wanted to repair our fractured relationship. I was skeptical but hopeful. "James thinks I'm at a charity retreat," she said, tapping manicured nails against the steering wheel of her luxury sedan. "He'd never understand me spending time with you." The words stung, but I was used to Sarah's casual cruelty. Since childhood, she'd wielded her 3-minute seniority like a weapon, establishing herself as the superior twin. Where I was bookish and reserved, Sarah was vibrant and calculating. She collected people like trophies, discarding them when they no longer served her purpose. "Still not over the James thing?" she asked, glancing sideways at my expression. "Honestly, Rachel, it's been 7 years. You dated for what? 3 months in college." 6, I corrected quietly. "And it was serious until you decided you wanted him." Sarah laughed, the sound both melodic and cutting. "He was obviously meant for me. Look at our life now." She flicked her wrist, diamond bracelet catching the headlights of passing cars. "You would have bored him to death in that little professor apartment of yours." That was Sarah, taking what she wanted without remorse. First it was my favorite toys, then my college boyfriend, then the inheritance our grandmother had specifically left for my education. Each betrayal calcified something inside me, hardening my heart toward my twin until our bond was merely biological, not emotional. "Besides," she continued, "I did you a favor. James isn't the man you think." Her words cut off as headlights suddenly blinded us. A truck had crossed the median, hydroplaning directly into our lane. Sarah jerked the wheel, sending us spinning toward the guardrail. Metal screamed against metal. The car flipped, tumbling down the embankment toward the churning ocean below. I remember moments in fragments. Sarah's scream. Glass piercing my face. The metallic taste of blood. The car coming to rest upside down, seawater already seeping through shattered windows. Sarah wasn't moving, her body limp against the deployed airbag. My face felt wrong, torn open and burning. Through the haze of pain, I managed to unbuckle her seatbelt, push open her door against the current, and drag us both onto the rocky shore before consciousness abandoned me. I woke in the hospital 3 days later, my face completely bandaged, tubes snaking from my arms. A nurse stood nearby, checking monitors. "She's awake," the nurse called, and footsteps rushed toward me. James appeared, haggard and unshaven. Behind him stood his sister Eliza, her expression unreadable. Neither had ever been able to tell Sarah and me apart without our different hairstyles or clothing choices. "Sarah," James said, gripping my hand. "Thank God. When they said one of you didn't make it." In that moment, with pain clouding my judgment and morphine loosening my inhibitions, I made a choice that would define the rest of my life. "Rachel's gone," I whispered, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had been removed earlier. The lie came easily, born from a lifetime of wanting what Sarah had. With my face unrecognizable beneath bandages, only Eliza knew both twins had been in the car. She frowned slightly but said nothing as James collapsed into tears against my hospital bed. The following months were excruciating, physically and mentally. Multiple surgeries reconstructed my shattered face using titanium plates and donor bone. The doctors told Sarah that I would look similar but never identical to my previous appearance. The perfect cover for subtle differences between twins. During my recovery, I committed fully to becoming Sarah. I read her journals, studied her handwriting, and watched home videos James brought to the hospital. I learned that her laugh started soft before building, that she gestured with her left hand while speaking, that she hated cilantro and lied about loving jazz to impress James's friends. I also discovered darker truths. Sarah's diary revealed affairs with 2 of James's colleagues and a sustained relationship with someone she referred to only as M. She documented every encounter in meticulous detail, alongside notes about offshore accounts where she'd been siphoning funds from James's family business. When I was finally released from the hospital, my new face still tender and unfamiliar, I convinced James the first needed time alone in our Beacon Hill home to adjust. Instead, I used Sarah's keys to access her private safe deposit box at Boston National Trust. Inside, I found exactly what her diary suggested: photographs documenting the affairs, account numbers for hidden funds, and something unexpected: evidence implicating James's family in tax fraud going back decades. Sarah hadn't just been cheating, she'd been building insurance. These weren't the actions of a woman in a loving marriage but of someone preparing an escape. Had she planned to leave James? Blackmail the Caldwells? I'll never know her endgame, but her meticulous collection became my protection. I memorized every document before returning them to the box. If my deception was ever discovered, I'd need leverage against the powerful Caldwell family. What began as an impulsive decision in a hospital bed evolved into something more calculated. A chance to become the woman James thought he'd married, but better. More loyal. More loving. Yet as I assumed Sarah's life, her clothes, her friends, her marriage bed, guilt sometimes threatened to overwhelm me. Not for taking her identity, but for the growing realization that I was falling in love with her husband. The same man she'd stolen from me years ago was now mine through the greatest deception of all. And standing in our anniversary party watching James's world collapse with Eliza's revelation, I finally understood. Sarah and I weren't so different after all. We both took what we wanted, consequences be damned. The first 6 months of becoming Sarah were the hardest. Every morning began with the same ritual: studying my new face in the mirror, memorizing its angles and expressions that weren't quite mine but weren't fully hers either. I'd practice her signature for an hour while the platinum blonde hair dye set. Sarah was naturally blonde like me, but she'd always gone 2 shades lighter. The doctors had warned Sarah that facial trauma could affect muscle memory, giving me the perfect excuse for slight differences in handwriting. "You're overthinking it," I whispered to my reflection one morning, trying to perfect Sarah's dismissive eye roll. "Let it flow naturally." I created systems for everything. Note cards for important dates in her life, spreadsheets of her friend circle with notes on their relationships, a voice recorder where I practiced her cadence and distinctive laugh until I could produce it on command. I even kept a journal documenting every lie I told, every detail I improvised, ensuring I never contradicted myself. The master bathroom became my training ground, its marble counters covered with Sarah's expensive makeup that I applied exactly as she had, following YouTube tutorials she'd bookmarked. I learned to walk in her 4-inch heels, to hold a wine glass by the stem with just my fingertips, to tilt my head at the precise angle she used when listening intently. What I hadn't prepared for was navigating a marriage that was clearly falling apart before the accident. James and I circled each other like cautious strangers those first months. He attributed my distance to trauma and grief over losing my sister, while I interpreted his coldness as appropriate space for recovery. Gradually, I realized the truth was more complicated. "You don't have to sleep in the guest room anymore," I said one night 6 months after coming home from the hospital. "The doctors say my face has healed enough." James looked surprised. "Are you sure? Before the accident you said." I waited, heart pounding. "What had Sarah said?" "You said you needed space," he finished carefully. "That we needed to reassess our relationship after the charity season ended." I swallowed hard. Sarah's journals had hinted at marital discord but not its extent. Had she been planning to leave him? The thought gave me an unexpected advantage. A blank slate. "The accident changed everything, James," I said, taking his hand. "Nearly dying makes you reconsider what matters. I don't want space anymore." That night marked the beginning of rebuilding their marriage. Or rather, building our new one. I approached James differently than Sarah had, with genuine interest rather than calculation. I asked about his work, remembered details he mentioned, surprised him with his favorite meals. Small gestures that Sarah's journals suggested she'd abandoned years ago. "You're different," he remarked one evening over dinner, studying me with puzzled affection. "Softer somehow." "Different how?" I asked cautiously. He considered this, swirling his wine. "Before, you'd never have asked that. You'd have changed the subject or made a joke." He reached for my hand. "I like this version of you." The guilt was unexpected and overwhelming. He was falling in love with me, not Sarah, while believing I was his wife. Some nights I'd lie awake beside him, wondering if I should confess everything. But each morning, preparing Sarah's favorite breakfast or kissing him goodbye, I chose deception again. Because somewhere between practicing her signature and sharing his bed, I'd fallen in love with James Caldwell. Not the James that Sarah had described in her journals, controlling, distant, preoccupied, but a man capable of tenderness and humor when approached differently. We created new rituals. Sunday morning runs along the Charles River, cooking classes on Wednesday evenings, spontaneous weekend trips to coastal towns. The close calls came sporadically. Sarah's college roommate visited from Chicago, puzzled by Sarah's newfound interest in history documentaries that I couldn't hide from the Netflix queue. My careful response about finding comfort in structured narratives during recovery seemed to satisfy her. James's cousin remarked at Christmas how I'd stopped interrupting people in conversation. "Trauma can reset neural pathways," I explained, recalling an article I'd bookmarked for just such occasions. "The doctor says personality shifts are common after severe injuries." The most dangerous encounter came from Sarah's longtime hairstylist, who noticed I'd now parted my hair on the opposite side. "You always insisted the right side was your good side for 20 years, she said, eyebrows raised in the mirror. "The scarring is less visible this way," I replied, pointing to a nearly invisible line beneath my jaw, one of the few physical reminders of the accident. She nodded sympathetically, crisis averted. As I settled into Sarah's life, I began noticing disturbing patterns in the Caldwell family dynamics. At holiday gatherings, conversations would halt when I entered rooms. James's father would exchange meaningful glances with Eliza during discussions of company finances. Once I overheard James arguing fiercely with his brother about keeping things internal and maintaining deniability. Sarah's secret files suddenly made more sense. The Caldwell investment firm wasn't just successful. It operated in gray areas of legality. Tax documents revealed systematic fraud, client accounts showed evidence of embezzlement, and correspondence hinted at insider trading. Sarah hadn't just been collecting insurance against James. She'd been documenting the entire family's corruption. Most concerning was Eliza's apparent vendetta against Sarah. Unlike the others who treated me with distant politeness, Eliza watched me constantly, asking pointed questions about past events, setting conversational traps I barely avoided. Her suspicion seemed born from more than just protective instincts toward her brother. "You look tired, Sarah," she remarked at a family dinner 18 months after the accident. "Those under-eye circles remind me of Rachel. She always had that hollow look, remember?" The casual cruelty confirmed what I'd suspected. Eliza had known about Sarah's affairs, perhaps even her plans to leave James. More disturbing was the implication that she'd recognized me from the beginning but was waiting for the perfect moment to expose my deception. I redoubled my efforts, becoming more Sarah than Sarah ever was. More attentive to James, more involved in charity work, more careful in every interaction with the Caldwells. I began gathering my own evidence on Eliza, noting her unexplained absences from family events, tracking inconsistencies in her statements, photographing documents when I visited the family offices. Living another woman's life had started as desperate self-preservation. It evolved into calculated revenge against a sister who had taken everything from me. Now, as I caught Eliza whispering to James at our anniversary party, I realized it had become something else entirely. A high-stakes game where my heart, my future, and possibly my freedom hung in the balance. As James and I drove home from our anniversary party in tense silence, I knew the final act of my performance had begun. 4 months, I had been assembling the pieces of my counterattack against Eliza, knowing this day would eventually come. It started innocently enough last Thanksgiving at the Caldwell estate. While the family gathered for pre-dinner drinks, I excused myself to use the restroom near Eliza's private office. With the family occupied by football and cocktails, I slipped inside with my phone camera ready. 15 minutes of rapid-fire photography captured bank statements, correspondence, and a particularly damning spreadsheet tracking funds diverted from client accounts to a shell corporation in the Caymans. Looking for something? I nearly dropped my phone as Eliza's husband Michael appeared in the doorway. My heart pounded as I slid the documents back into place. "Aspirin," I said, gesturing toward my temple. "My head is killing me, and I knew Eliza keeps some in her desk." He hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly before his social training kicked in. "Top right drawer. Don't tell her I told you, she hates people in her office." "Our secret," I replied with Sarah's conspiratorial smile. That close call only strengthened my resolve. The next week I purchased high-end surveillance equipment disguised as ordinary objects. A phone charger with a hidden camera, a decorative clock with a microphone, and a wireless speaker that served as both. When the Caldwells hosted their annual Christmas charity event, I arrived early to help with preparations, strategically placing my devices throughout Eliza's home office and the family's library where they held private discussions. The footage I collected over the following months exceeded my wildest expectations. Not only was Eliza embezzling from the family business, but she was also having an affair with James's business partner, Richard. Their pillow talk revealed plans to systematically undermine James's position in the company, documenting minor mistakes and gradually limiting his access to major clients. "James is too soft," Eliza told Richard during one recorded meeting in February. "He still believes in playing by the rules." The family voted. "He needs to be sidelined before he discovers the Chin account discrepancies and has a crisis of conscience." Richard nodded, refilling their whiskey glasses. "Your father agrees?" "Daddy knows James would fold under SEC questioning. He's always been the weak link." Each revelation was carefully cataloged, encrypted, and backed up. I created a comprehensive digital archive of the Caldwell family's financial misdeeds spanning 3 generations. Tax evasion schemes, manipulated client accounts, bribed officials. I included Sarah's original evidence alongside my own, creating an ironclad case that could destroy the entire Caldwell empire. But documents alone weren't enough. I needed insurance. Someone outside the situation who could release everything if something happened to me. After careful consideration, I chose Dr. Monica Lynn, my former therapist from before the accident, who had no connection to Sarah or the Caldwells. "I need you to hold something for me," I told her during a coffee meeting, sliding an encrypted drive across the table. "It's insurance. If you don't hear from me every 30 days with a specific code phrase, or if anything happens to me, Deliver copies to these addresses. I handed her sealed envelopes containing instructions for delivery to the SEC, FBI, and 3 major financial newspapers. Rachel, she said using the name she'd known me by, are you in danger? Just cautious, I replied. Some people collect art. I collect secrets. By the time our 10th anniversary arrived, my preparations were complete. As James drove us home from the party, occasionally glancing at me with a mixture of horror and confusion, I felt strangely calm. The garden confrontation had only been the opening move in a game I'd been preparing to play for years. When we arrived home, James poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and paced our living room. Who are you? He finally demanded. Instead of answering, I walked to the bookshelf and removed a false-backed classic novel, one of Sarah's hiding places I'd discovered years ago. From it, I extracted a single photograph and handed it to James. Before we discuss who I am, I said calmly, let's talk about who your sister really is. The photo showed Eliza and Richard in an intimate embrace in her office, date stamped from 6 months ago. James stared at it, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. What the hell is this? Where did you get this? The same place I got these, I replied, opening my laptop to display financial records showing Eliza's systematic theft from the company. And this is just the beginning. I have evidence of everything, James. Every secret, every crime, every betrayal in your family. Including what your father did with the pension fund in 2018. His face drained of color as I mentioned the family's most carefully guarded scandal. How could you possibly know about that? Sarah knew, I said simply. And now I know. The question isn't whether I'm Sarah. It's whether you can afford for me not to be. I watched him process this, his legal mind calculating implications and consequences. Are you blackmailing me? I'm offering perspective, I corrected. Eliza wants to destroy me because I threatened her position as your father's favorite. She never cared about you or your marriage. She wanted Sarah gone because your wife was gathering evidence against the family. James collapsed onto the sofa, the weight of betrayal crushing him from all sides. So it's true then? You're Rachel? The moment had come for my calculated confession. I sat across from him, maintaining eye contact. Yes. Sarah died in that accident. The injuries to my face required complete reconstruction, and in the hospital when everyone assumed I was her. I let the explanation hang. Why? He whispered. Why would you pretend to be your own sister? Live her life? Share her bed? Initially, survival. The doctor said I would need multiple surgeries, specialized care. Sarah had insurance, money, security, everything I'd lost when she stole you from me years ago. I leaned forward. But then something unexpected happened. I fell in love with you, the real you, not the man Sarah described in her journals. His expression hardened. And now you're threatening to destroy my family if I expose you. I'm ensuring mutual survival, I countered. Tomorrow morning you have a choice. You can tell everyone I'm an imposter and watch your family empire collapse under federal investigation, or you can stand beside your wife of 10 years and help me neutralize the real threat, Eliza. I rose and placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling him flinch beneath my touch. I've been a better wife to you than Sarah ever was. You said it yourself. You like this version of me. As I turned to leave him with his thoughts, he grabbed my wrist, not roughly like in the garden but with desperate confusion. If I agree to this arrangement, what happens next? I smiled, knowing I'd won. We continue our marriage. You help me remove Eliza from the company. In return, I'll protect your family's secrets, from everyone except you. No more lies between us. In the silence that followed, I saw resignation in his eyes. By morning, when he appeared in the kitchen and wordlessly poured himself coffee, I knew my transformation was complete. I had evolved from victim to deceiver to architect of my own future. We'll need a plan for Eliza, he said finally. I already have one, I replied. The Caldwell family's annual spring gala provided the perfect backdrop for our plan against Eliza. While outwardly maintaining the facade of perfect sister-in-law relations, James and I had spent weeks meticulously preparing her downfall. You're certain this will work? James asked as he adjusted his bow tie in our bedroom mirror. Eliza made one critical mistake, I replied, fastening Sarah's diamond earrings that now felt rightfully mine. She assumed she was the only one watching. We arrived separately at the gala. James directly from the office, I fashionably late in a gown Sarah would have chosen. The Caldwell patriarch greeted me with his customary kiss on the cheek, oblivious to the fact that his daughter had exposed me as an impostor to James. Eliza stood nearby, her triumphant smile barely concealed as she watched us. "Sarah," she said, embracing me with practiced insincerity. "James mentioned you weren't feeling well. I'm surprised you made it." "I wouldn't miss tonight for anything," I replied, matching her false warmth. "Especially with the exciting company announcement." Her smile faltered briefly. "Announcement? Didn't James tell you?" He insisted on keeping it a surprise. As I glided away, I caught James's eye across the room. He nodded imperceptibly and approached the small stage where a microphone stood ready. The crowd quieted as he tapped the glass in his hand. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, voice resonating with authority that had been missing in our early marriage. "The Caldwell Group has always prided itself on family leadership and integrity." Eliza moved toward the front, confusion evident on her face. "Tonight, I'm pleased to announce a restructuring of our executive team," James continued. "After reviewing our operational efficiency, the board has approved my recommendation for a new chief compliance officer who will report directly to me." His father frowned from the front row, clearly unaware of this development. "Richard Evans will be stepping down as partner effective immediately," James announced, causing a ripple of whispers. "And my sister Eliza will be transitioning from her role as CFO to head our new charitable foundation." Eliza's face contorted with rage as she realized what was happening. Her positions of power, both professional and as James's most trusted advisor, were being stripped away publicly. "Furthermore," James added, "we'll be conducting a comprehensive audit of all accounts under previous management, ensuring complete transparency for our clients and regulators." The message was unmistakable. Eliza pushed through the crowd toward James, but his father intercepted her, gripping her arm tightly while maintaining his public smile. Later that evening in the Caldwell estate study, the family confrontation unfolded exactly as we'd planned. "Have you lost your mind?" Eliza hissed at James. "You can't remove me. I built half those client relationships." "Show them, James," I said quietly from my position by the fireplace. James opened his laptop, displaying video footage of Eliza and Richard discussing their embezzlement scheme and their plans to undermine James. The elder Caldwell's face hardened as he watched. "Is this authenticated?" "Multiple sources," James replied. "And there's more. Records of transfers, altered documents, communications with offshore accounts." "She put you up to this," Eliza spat, pointing at me. "She's not even Sarah." "Tell them, James. Tell them she's an imposter." All eyes turned to James. The moment of truth had arrived. "My wife has been instrumental in uncovering your betrayal," he said evenly. "Whether you accept her or not is irrelevant. The evidence speaks for itself." "DNA doesn't lie," Eliza insisted desperately. "Neither do bank records," I countered, stepping forward. "You have a choice, Eliza. Accept the generous offer to head the foundation, with strict financial oversight of course, or explain to federal investigators why client funds were diverted through your personal accounts." The ultimatum hung in the air as Eliza realized her defeat. She had gambled on exposing me without anticipating I had assembled my own weapon against her. "This isn't over," she whispered, but the fight had drained from her voice. As we left the estate that night, James took my hand in the car, the first genuine gesture of partnership since the anniversary revelation. "That was masterfully done," he said, his voice a mixture of admiration and lingering wariness. "I learned from the best," I replied. "Sarah taught me that power lies in knowing people's secrets." Following Eliza's effective neutralization, James and I established a new kind of marriage, one built on pragmatic truth rather than romantic illusion. He knew who I really was and I understood the family I had married into. We were accomplices now, bound by mutual secrets and survival. "We need to discuss the parameters," James said one evening in his home office, legal mind always seeking structure. "What exactly is this arrangement between us?" "Publicly nothing changes," I explained. "I remain Sarah Caldwell, your devoted wife. You remain the rising star of the Caldwell Group, untarnished by scandal." "And privately?" I considered his question carefully. Privately, no more lies. You know I'm Rachel. I know about your family's financial misdeeds. We hold each other's destruction in our hands. That's not a marriage, he objected. That's mutually assured destruction. Perhaps, I conceded. But it could become something else over time. Something genuine. The transition wasn't smooth. Some nights, James would look at me across the dinner table with confusion in his eyes, as if trying to reconcile the woman he had grown to love with the knowledge of my deception. Other times he would ask about Rachel, about me, trying to separate the real person from the performance. Did you always love books, or was that Sarah? He asked once. That was me, I admitted. Sarah preferred magazines and social media. She never finished a novel in her life. And the cooking classes we take? Also me. Sarah ordered takeout or had staff prepare meals. Gradually, these conversations painted a picture for James of the woman he had actually been living with, and how different she was from the wife he thought he'd married. To my surprise, he seemed to prefer the truth. I think I've been happier these past 3 years than in the 7 before, he confessed one night. I always felt Sarah was playing a role, that she married me for the Caldwell name. The woman I've been with since the accident. You seem to genuinely care. I do care, I whispered, the admission frightening in its vulnerability. Our arrangement evolved as James began dismantling his family's questionable business practices from within. He hired legitimate compliance officers, returned misappropriated funds through complex legal maneuvers, and gradually steered the Caldwell Group toward ethical operation without triggering public scandal. Meanwhile, I maintained careful watch over Eliza, who had retreated to her role heading the foundation but remained a potential threat. The surveillance equipment stayed in place, monitoring her communications and movements. Trust would never be part of our family dynamic. 6 months after our confrontation, the inevitable finally happened. During a charity event, one of Sarah's oldest friends approached me with troubled eyes. I've been doing some research into facial recognition, she said quietly. The proportional changes in your face don't match typical reconstruction patterns. You look like Sarah but measured differently. My heart pounded as she continued. You remind me more of Rachel now, she said. Sarah's sister, the one who died in the accident. I maintained Sarah's composed smile. Trauma changes people, Charlotte. Sometimes physically, sometimes deeper. This isn't trauma, she insisted. This is something else entirely. Before I could respond, James appeared at my side, hand protectively at my waist. Charlotte, how wonderful to see you. I hope you're not monopolizing my wife's time with ancient history. His subtle warning was clear. Charlotte retreated, but the encounter shook me. That night, I prepared to activate my contingency plans, ready to flee if necessary. Don't, James said, catching me downloading files in his office. We'll handle this together. She knows, I said. Let her speculate, he replied. Without DNA evidence, it's just gossip. And Charlotte values her position in society too much to risk being labeled unstable. He was right. The whispers remained just that, whispers. Our carefully constructed life continued, reinforced by James's growing power within Boston's elite circles. Those who might question Sarah's identity found themselves subtly excluded from key social events or business opportunities. 3 years after our anniversary confrontation, 6 years after the accident that transformed me into Sarah, James and I sat on our terrace overlooking Boston Harbor. The evening was unseasonably warm for April, the sky painted in dramatic sunset hues. I received interesting news today, James said, swirling his whiskey. The statute of limitations has expired on the Chandler account irregularities. I understood the significance immediately. The last major financial impropriety that could have damaged the Caldwell Group was now legally untouchable. The threat of exposure that had been our mutual insurance policy was diminishing. Where does that leave us? I asked, voicing the question that had lingered unspoken between us. James considered me thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. In these years of truth between us, he had aged gracefully into his authority, silver threading his temples. It leaves us with a choice, he finally replied. Continue as we are, bound by secrets and pragmatism. Or we could start over. Not as James and Sarah Caldwell. Not even as James and Rachel. I don't understand. He set down his glass and took my hands. What if we left? Sold the company, liquidated the assets. Moved somewhere new where no one knows the Caldwells or the complicated history of identical twins. The suggestions stunned me. You would give up everything? The Caldwell legacy? Your position? The legacy is tainted, he said simply. Always has been. As for position, I've learned there's freedom in leaving expectations behind. What about Eliza? Your father? They've been contained but never truly neutralized. Eventually another scandal will emerge. Better to separate cleanly with our resources intact. His proposal was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. To abandon the identity I had so carefully maintained, to step into yet another new life. But this time, one chosen freely rather than born of desperation. Who would we become? I asked. Whoever we want, he replied. That's the point. 3 months later, we signed the final papers transferring control of the Caldwell Group to a management team led by James's most trusted lieutenant. Eliza fought the sale viciously but was overruled by her father, who had grown weary of corporate battles and familial tension. The night before our departure from Boston, I stood in our bedroom looking at my reflection. The face that gazed back was neither fully Sarah's nor the Rachel I had been before. It was uniquely mine, forged through accident, deception, and ultimately choice. James appeared behind me, placing a gold compass in my hand. For our new direction, he said simply. Do you ever miss her? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally spoken aloud. The real Sarah? He considered this carefully. I miss the idea of her sometimes, the woman I thought I married. But I've come to realize she never truly existed. Sarah projected whatever image served her purpose in the moment. And me? The woman who took her place. James turned me to face him directly. You began as her mirror image, reflecting what you thought I wanted. But somewhere along the way you became real. More authentic than she ever allowed herself to be. Even built on deception? Especially then, he said, brushing his fingers along my cheek. You had to discover who you truly were while pretending to be someone else. Perhaps the hardest path to authenticity imaginable. The following morning, we boarded a private plane with new passports bearing names we had chosen together. The woman who had been Sarah Caldwell, who had been Rachel Morgan before that, embarked on her third life. This one chosen with clear eyes and, improbably, with love that had survived the ultimate test of truth. As Boston disappeared beneath us, I closed Sarah's diary for the final time. No more signatures to practice, no more mannerisms to mimic. The ultimate revenge against my sister wasn't taking her identity, but finding happiness in the life she had never appreciated. Ready? James asked as we reached cruising altitude. I smiled, my own smile, not Sarah's practiced one. I've been ready since that night in the hospital. I just didn't know what I was waiting for. The deception that began as survival and evolved into revenge had ultimately become the strangest form of salvation. My sister's face had given me a second chance, but it would be my own heart that would define what I did with it.